Farms are a curious business. It's the kind of place that deceives. From the outside, it looks like just scrubland, mud, animals, and one or two rusty tractors. But anyone who lives in this kind of world knows there is hierarchy, structure, history, and above all, limits. And it was precisely this magic word that the woman from the house with the white picket fence, also known as the president of the Residents Association of the Flor do Campo housing estate, decided to ignore with strength, courage, and a stupidity the size of a pregnant cow. It all started when she appeared at the farm gate with a piece of paper in her hand and that little smile of people who think they're going to teach you a lesson. The paper was a poorly printed map that supposedly showed the community's shared use limits. According to her, my property was part of an old informal agreement that set aside that piece of land for recreational use by local residents. I kept looking at her face and wondering if the heat had melted some part of her brain, but she seemed convinced. And when someone with an inflated ego and minimal power believes they have authority over something that isn't theirs, you already know it's going to go to shit, literally. The woman said that my pasture was perfect for community activities. Do you know what she meant by that? That she wanted to turn the flattest part of the farm, where the dairy cows and the old shed are, into a kind of makeshift country park. And she wasn't kidding. The next day, tents, picnic tables, speakers, and even a guy with a portable barbecue began to arrive. They turned my land into a Sunday festival. They didn't ask. They didn't pay. They didn't explain. They just arrived, as if everything was normal. And it wasn't just people walking around. There were children running around in the middle of the corral, adults playing soccer near the greenhouse, and, at the height of it all, a yoga group spreading out a mat right next to the exit of the farm's cesspit. A spectacle. A collective outbreak of people who think that stepping on land with cow dung is synonymous with connecting with nature. They set up a kind of camp with colorful tents, flags, and even a banner that read HOA Nature Day, Reconnect, all on my land, without permission, no contract, no shame. And to complete the horror show, the woman even had the nerve to send me a community notification saying that my presence there, without participating in the collective event, was generating energy conflict. Look, so far I don't know if it was a joke or if she really believed that my cattle were getting in the way of the meditation. What she didn't know, or didn't realize, was that the piece of land where they camped, danced, and had an impromptu barbecue was right on top of the ecological septic tank we've been using on the farm for years. A simple, efficient system with an emergency valve that, when opened, redirects the excess waste to a containment area further away. A useful tool, and extremely strategic. I could have called the police, I could have sued, but honestly, that deserved a different approach. Something more educational, more striking. So I did what any farmer tired of urban tomfoolery would do. I went to the hydraulic pump house, checked the system, turned on the panel, and opened the safety valve. The result was movie-worthy. First came the noise, a dry squeak, as if something was being sucked in and spat out at the same time. Then there was a slight tremor in the ground, enough to make the tents sway. And then the mud, dense, hot, greenish-brown, and with an aroma that mixed manure, decomposition, and communal frustration. The first jet hit the center of the camp, right where the circle dance group was doing chakra opening movements. Within seconds, the music stopped. The screams started. Someone slipped, fell face first into the mud, and took the cooler of detox juices with them. A tent flew in the wind and landed inside the pigsty. It was poetry, chaotic, noisy, wet, but poetry nonetheless. The woman ran towards me, slipping, tripping over her own legs, her hair full of fragments of something that certainly wasn't clay. She shouted that she was going to report me, that this was an environmental crime, that I was a savage. But this time, I smiled. I smiled broadly, with the peace of mind of someone who has just activated a drainage system on private property. All within the law, within the limits. The very limits she chose to ignore. Most fled. Some tried to salvage what they could. Cell phones, sneakers, dignity. But it was too late. The damage was done. And the smell, well, that stayed for days. In the following days, I received 3 letters from the association. The first, trying to blame my farm for the contamination of community activity. The second, asking for a meeting to rebuild dialogue between neighboring properties. And the third, that was the best, a formal apology signed by her, saying that there was a misunderstanding about the boundaries of the land and the nature of the events organized. Misunderstanding, she said, as if planting a flag on someone else's land was a GPS error. She thought she could invade and decorate my space as if it were an extension of the HOA's yard. But the only camp she managed to set up was a minefield of mud and poo. And look, there's more to come. What came after the mud show was almost funnier than the scene itself. The association group went into a kind of moral mourning. They spent days disappearing from the streets, from social networks, from the messaging groups, where they used to think they were the champions of community life. The woman who was the face on every HOA newsletter disappeared like a TV commercial after the skip ad button. The farm returned to its routine. The cows, who had been more stressed by the noise of the ambient forest bath sound than by the sewage bath itself, relaxed. The rooster crowed again without being interrupted by a Tibetan gong, and the dogs stopped barking as if they were warning that a strange cult was underway in the shed. But, of course, peace is never a permanent state when you have someone like her around. A week was enough. 7 days. And that's it. The suspicious movement returned. First, there was a black pickup truck, all decorated with banners and cones, parked again near the gate. Then a cleaning crew, hired by some HOA Solidarity Fund, I imagine, showed up with masks, gloves, and buckets of disinfectant that smelled like a hospital or health center. Apparently, they were trying to restore the association's public space that was the target of rural sabotage. They called it sabotage. I call it a return to origins. But it was on the 8th day that the situation took on another level of comedy. The woman reappeared, alone this time, with clean clothes, but the same wide eyes of someone who could still smell the previous week. She parked the car at a safe distance, or maybe she just didn't want her sedan to sink into the remains of the sanitary catastrophe, and came walking out with a folder of documents and that forced gait of someone who wants to look calm and safe, but looks more like she urgently needs a toilet. She said she wanted to talk. He wanted to better understand the legal boundaries of the property, that perhaps the association's map was out of date. Maybe. He opened the folder and started leafing through colored sheets with pen markings, showing territory projections and shared areas according to the 2004 minutes. There was even an old photo, taken with a digital camera like the kind that blows out the flash, showing a burning event on the land with children and popcorn, probably something she used as proof of collective land use. I let her talk. Talking gets tiring. Too long an explanation is always a sign that the person isn't sure what they're saying. We just want a place to come together, you know? A place where the community can connect with nature, reconnect with each other. And your farm is perfect for that. She said this looking into my eyes, as if she were offering world peace, but her eyes were shaking, as if they knew they were apologizing too much to someone who had already seen the neighborhood's ego sinking into the mud. I replied with the same calm she never had. The only connection here was between your ignorance and the sewage system. And honestly, the cesspit reacted a lot better than I did. She had no answer. She just lowered her eyes and tried to push a piece of paper at me, a new, temporary authorization for collective use of the rural area. The attempt was clear, to pretend that everything could be solved with a signature. But what she didn't understand, even after all the literal shit she'd been through, was that respect doesn't come with an association stamp. I asked her to leave, calmly. No shouting, no offense. I just asked. She hesitated, but went. Slow steps, shrunken indignation, briefcase pressed against her chest like a shield, and as she left, I saw one of the cleaners trip over a remnant of hardened mud and fall backwards with his bucket flying. I swear I held in my laughter. After that day, they tried to regain control of the narrative. They sent out a bulletin saying that the HOA is considering legal options against acts of sabotage. They published old photos of events on the farm, trying to reinforce the idea that the land has always been a community space. They even sent an institutional video, narrated by a child, with a piano soundtrack, talking about the dream of a neighborhood united by the land. But nobody bought it. The neighborhood knew. The smell was still too fresh in everyone's memory. And the worst thing was that the more they tried to save their image, the more they sank into shame. They became the butt of jokes in closed groups, a meme at family gatherings, and the talk of the town among delivery drivers. Some people even started marking the place on Google Maps as Ecological Pit Training Camp, an instant classic. And the farm? It remained the same. Tired of the attempted invasion, but firm. The animals returned to their natural rhythm. The soil began to recover, and the sewage system, well, that now had its own name, HOA valve. What she didn't understand, and perhaps never will, is that not every place is for sale. Not all land can be used by the community, and that there are people who won't sign a piece of paper just because it comes with an association logo. She wanted to play landowner. She ended up getting the biggest reality check of her life. The days following the association's health event became the stuff of local legend. Some even suggested including the case on the city's historical tour itinerary. Between the century-old church and the old artesian well, the spiritual flood of the HOA, as some have come to call it, the subject was unavoidable. Any conversation, queue at the bakery or coffee at the gas station began and ended with the same phrase. Have you seen the video of Karen stuck in the mud? And yes, there was a video. Of course there was. One of the neighborhood's teenagers, who had gone to the ecological retreat, out of obligation to his parents, filmed the whole thing with his cell phone and posted it on the web before he even got home. The video went viral faster than a mosquito in a flooded plantation. There was dramatic music editing, a slow-motion version, an electronic remix with a funk beat, and even a montage of the woman in the middle of a river of Willy Wonka chocolate. The creativity of the people is something that the pit itself could never contain. And as much as the association tried to erase the digital traces, sending notifications, reporting the videos, trying to contact the teenager's parents, it was too late. The image of her, covered in mud up to her knees, trying to save a Zen HOA space sign while slipping and leaning on a pile of manure, was already eternalized in the collective memory. But the most fascinating thing was to see how she reacted to it all. Instead of disappearing, hiding, and accepting defeat, she doubled down. She returned to the neighborhood with the air of a martyr, as if she had survived an environmental attack. She started telling alternative versions of the story, saying that she had been the victim of a calculated attack, that the pipe had been manipulated on purpose to stifle the community's progress. In other words, he played the victim. With force, with the right to a distant look, a dramatic sigh, and, of course, speeches in the neighborhood group. The woman started showing up at community meetings wearing discreet clothes, with a quiet voice and a new proposal: regulation of semi-private spaces for the purposes of collective integration. In other words, she wanted to turn into law what she had tried to do by force. And as there's always one or two neighbors who are uninformed or too lazy to read the history, he got some support. People who didn't even know where the farm was, but who thought the talk of connection with the land and equal access to nature was beautiful. That's where my father came in. He had always left the farm in my hands, but when he saw the level the situation was taking, he decided to act. He arrived quietly, as always, a simple man with a battered hat and a low voice. but with a look that had already brought down much more than the neighborhood association. At the HOA meeting, while the woman was doing her sentimental theatrics talking about healing space, he asked to speak. "It's funny how you want to reconnect with the land so much, but you can't even tell the difference between a pasture and a square. That piece of land you've filled with tents is a productive system. It has economic, ecological, and historical value. It's not a weekend playground for bored people to pretend to live simply." The room went silent. No one was waiting. The woman tried to respond, but my father continued, now more directly. "You didn't ask for permission. You didn't negotiate. You just arrived, broke in, had a party, and then complained about the smell. That's not coexistence. That's arrogance." He then handed over a copy of the farm's property register with an official plan, registration number, and City Hall stamp. On top of that, he attached a report on the ecological sewage system, with health authorization and everything in order. Everything in order. The woman picked up the papers with trembling hands. She tried to argue something about community tradition, but no one else was listening. The magic was over. The bubble had burst. After that meeting, the attempt to turn the farm into a shared area officially died. Even the dreamiest members of the association realized that they were trying to turn a productive property into a weekend country spa. The HOA itself released a statement saying that it respects the legal boundaries of properties in the area, and that it recognizes the importance of maintaining healthy relationships with all residents. Translation: they sat on the punishment bench and swallowed dry. The woman stopped showing up. Some bad tongues say she tried to sell the house. Others swear that she went to live with her sister in another city to breathe new air. But it's more likely that she finally understood that not all land wants to be touched by hands that don't work. The farm is still going strong. The sewage system, now more famous than the corral itself, has become a local legend. There are even people passing by to take a photo with the valve of justice, as they called the pump that saved the dignity of our property. I'm still here, sipping my coffee on the veranda, watching the birds, the oxen, and every now and then a curious visitor who comes to ask, "Is this where that mud thing happened?" Yes, it's right here. Yes, it's right here. And the best is yet to come. The HOA was never the same after the collective rural bath. The truth is that not even the neighborhood escaped unscathed. What was once a meticulously organized community, where even the length of the curtains had to meet the standard of the regulations, has become a fragmented territory, divided between those nostalgic for order and those freed from the sanitary nightmare. And in the midst of all this, the farm became a symbol of resistance, unwillingly, without asking, but with great pride. What followed the woman's legal fiasco was a string of small, silent victories. The first was to see the association itself swallow its words and officially cancel the Community Integration Project in neighboring areas. The term, which sounded like a thesis written at a meeting over cheap wine, disappeared from the documents. The proposal evaporated. No one dared to say that my land was for shared use. Even the most insistent began to look away when the subject came up. They lost their strength. They lost their breath. They lost heart. The woman, who had already reinvented herself as a defender of access to nature, reappeared one last time. It was at a bakery downtown, wearing a low-cut cap, sunglasses, and a blouse that said, "Good vibes only." The irony of the look was almost offensive. She tried to go unnoticed, but everyone knew who she was. And when she asked for her coffee, with vegetable milk, of course, the attendant replied, with the most debauched smile I've ever seen, "Do you want to take it with you, or would you rather have it here, in the countryside?" She didn't reply. She picked up her glass and left with quick steps, almost tripping over her own indignation. From then on, the erasure phase began. She disappeared from the neighborhood group, deleted the posts where she talked about the union of the earth, took down the blog she had created with tips on outdoor meditation, using photos of my farm as an illustration. Even the sign on her house changed. Where it used to read Lar Harmonico, Casa Dos, Harmonic Home, House 12, now it just had the number painted on with ordinary paint, without any fuss. A clear symbol that Mrs. Nature and her gang had had a reality check, with a thorough rinse. But what really struck me was her last move before leaving the scene for good. One cold morning, a letter arrived in the farm's mailbox. A thick envelope, no sender. Inside, a handwritten letter and a small bottle with a handmade label saying, "Lavender spray to energize environments." The letter was brief, written in slanted handwriting, and forced attempts at humility. I know our visions were different. Perhaps I jumped the gun. I hope this scent will help to purify any hurt that remains. Best wishes, J. There was no formal signature, just an initial. But the scent of past arrogance was still on the paper. I kept the letter, not for the message, but as a reminder of the day someone discovered, the hard way, that forced spirituality doesn't stand up to a functioning sewage system. The HOA, trying to get back on its feet, elected a new board of directors. Calmer people, less affected by manuals of conduct and more concerned with actually keeping things running. The new president is a soft-spoken gentleman in dirty boots who only cares that the electric fence is working and that the garbage is being collected. No events on the farm, no group mantras in the orchard. He knows where he stands, and he respects where he's not asked. The farm, in turn, has almost become a local tourist attraction. From time to time, cars drive by slowly just to try and see the famous valve of justice. I've even heard rumors that some influencers from the neighboring town wanted to come and record videos here, with titles like Fazenda da Fossa Milagrosa, Caso de Autenticidade Rural, Miraculous Trench Farm, a case of rural authenticity. I'm still deciding whether to let them. My parents? They're still calm. My father has returned to the quiet routine of looking after the oxen and the bills. My mother planted flowers around the cesspit, a humorous or decorative gesture she doesn't even know. All she says is that now the place has history. And the neighbors? Those who used to stand on the wall have now moved over. They come over for coffee, help with the harvest from time to time, bring cake, ask about the cows. The real community, the one that is built with respect and time, has blossomed from the ashes of the mud. And that's beautiful to see. What surprises me most in the end is how it all boils down to a simple idea that this woman has never been able to grasp. Property isn't just about fences and deeds. It's experience, it's history, it's sweat and roots. You don't impose your presence where you don't belong. You don't invade the land of someone who was born knowing where they stand. She wanted to play at integration. She wanted to decorate reality with meditation cushions and gourmet bumper stickers. She forgot that the ground where she wanted to plant her arrogance was fertile, but she also knew how to give back. And it did, with mud, with smell, with force, but above all, with a lesson. The last time I saw the woman was in a supermarket in another city. She was different, simpler, quieter. She picked up a bag of rice and looked at the shelf as if she were still searching for something she'd never had. Knowledge. She walked past me, recognized me. She gave a shy smile. I just nodded. No irony, no debauchery, because at that moment, she had already lost everything she wanted to control. And that in itself was enough. The farm goes on. The days go on. The land breathes. And the cesspit? It's still there, silent, waiting for the next unwanted visitor with all the patience in the world. And if you liked this video, don't forget to leave a comment and a like.